The first thing I wanted to touch on, which is probably the most common question before and when people get here, is bait. How much, what salt, and hook baits and etc. to go with it all. So what I wanted to do was very quickly look at what I've bought. I'm here for 2 nights, sort of day and a half, 36 hours. So it gives you an idea of what I hopefully will need. I mean, if I don't use it, I don't use it. But I've got what I think I would need if it really kicked off, which sometimes it can. So obviously we supply baits here that a lot of people use. I would say probably 80% of people use them, and as a result the fish are very, very used to seeing them. There's 3 main boilies that we supply. The first one is Activate, the freezer bait. We do that in 15s and 18s. We do a Coron special, which is a dark sort of fruity fish meal, which is a really good feed bait, very digestible, very soft. And then we do what I call the new CSs, the new Coron specials, and basically they're a more subtle boilie and a washed out colour, almost white in colour. And that's because of the trend of very much that I've noticed fish are being caught sort of 12 to 14 hours after the bait's been put in, and definitely from when I feed them I've noticed that being sort of 24 hours after I've put in a large amount of bait. I'm talking sort of 30 kilo plus. So a lot of what I suggest to people to do is wash their baits out. If you can do it before you get here in tap water, absolutely fine. If you want to do it sort of the day you arrive, absolutely fine. A lot of people are a bit nervous about washing out baits. Why would I pay all this money for a bait and then wash all the flavour out? Well, in my eyes, the flavour is very much there for you when you sniff that bag and go, oh, doesn't that smell carpy? Well, in reality, the actual fish pays little to no attention to the signal that we smell. To me, a good boilie is all about its base mix and its liquid additives, its nutraminos, liver extracts, all that sort of thing, which are available in all 3 of the baits that I promote, and a lot of the baits that other people bring over. A lot of good quality bait that comes over here, and a little bit of trash. But so what I've done is, because I'm fishing here, yesterday I washed out 2 buckets worth of bait, well, half buckets, but 2 different baits. So first of all, you've got the Coron specials. They've been in there for only 24 hours. I'd like to have got them in there a bit longer, but this is the dark one. Very little I can tell you apart from that. And this is the already washed out sort of whitey off-white version. They've been in there for 24 hours, and they'll tell you the duration of my trip. And if I was here for a week, I would constantly be updating, having a 3rd bucket on the go. And when the first one's empty, I've already got one that's washed out. And the main reason for that is, one, as I say, I feel that fish, especially not just here, all over the place. Great trick on Cassian we used to do all the time. We used to send bait out there first and get it washed out by Matt, who used to run trips out there. Anyway, so one, obviously, that I think they're holding off fresh beds of bait, and 2, and really importantly to me, and what I think a lot of people struggle with, they have fish, or they lose a fish, or they get picked up, whatever it may be, but they've had an occurrence. They play the fish in, pictures are done, bosh, we've got to get the rod straight back out on the spot, of course, great. And then we've got brand new fresh bait that's just come out of the freezer or been air dried or whatever it may be, and we go around and we dump another 3-4 handfuls on top. If there's any fish there beforehand, in my eyes, all of a sudden there's a whole new food signal and a bit of danger coming off the area that originally they might have thought was safe. So to me, one of the biggest edges is, if I have a fish, fingers crossed I do, off one of these spots, I've got bait ready to go and just flick out a handful or 2 round on the other bank that won't spook them from being too strong. There's not too much of a change in the position. So if I had caught a fish or there was a little disturbance, they might have backed off slightly, but because the bait's still there and because it's washed out and it's been in there a little while, they feel confident to come back to it. So if I want to top it up with 2 or 3 handfuls, my bait's like the bait that they were already thinking safe. So that's obviously the 2 Corons. And this one's been in here 3 days now. This is the Activate. What I do is, when I take my Activate out of the freezer, I don't agree with, it's not that I disagree, I don't like air drying bait. In my eyes, all you're doing is creating little round sponges. They dry out, all the moisture is sort of extracted from them in buckets or whatever way you choose to air dry your bags and your baits, and then you throw them in the water and they suck in the water around them. That could be silt, that could be sort of crappy mulch and chod, and basically all you're doing is, in my eyes, denaturing your bait. So what I like to do is, I open the bag when it's still all frozen solid, and I put a glug of either the Activate particle liquid in there or a glug of the liquid liver. I put that back in there, seal the bag up. I like to sweat my bag. I don't want any of the sort of the freezer dust to go anywhere but back into my bait, because a freezer dehydrates bait, it pulls the moisture out, so a lot of that ice and dust that's in there is actually the goodness in the bait. So but I want to reabsorb that, and I want to put a little bit of extra attraction in, but nothing sort of spooky. So I put the liver in, or the particle aid. I let it absorb so that it's all back in and it's then dry. Open the bag up and I stick the whole lot in a washed out bucket, in a bucket ready to wash out. And if you look at the Activate now, it's very pale in colour, almost very light grey / white, and to me that is, to a fish, very, very safe. So visually and texturally it's washed out, but it's still got a little bit of added attraction which they cannot resist, things like liquid liver, we all know that. So you've got some signals coming off, but visually, excuse the dog, he does like being on camera, but visually it's perfect for him. Excuse me, Mac. You know, it's not going to spook him. So I've got, for 48 hours, I've got 4 kilo of the Coron specials, sort of 2 kilo of each colour, and I've got 2.5 kilo of the Activate washed out. And as I say, combined, that's probably been in there for 3 days for the Activate, sort of 24 hours for the Coron specials, and I would have liked to have had both in for 3 days. So they're totally washed out. I don't get rid of the water. I'll use that for pellets and other things. Again, excuse the dog. I use that for pellets and other things to wash it down, because that's another thing. When we come on to pellet, which I will now, that's exactly the same principle. You've had a fish, you throw in a load of fresh pellet, it's all hard, it's all oily, and as a result, again, you've got sort of fear signals coming off it. So what I'll do is I'll always have a little bucket of pellet ready to go, and I'll actually squidge it up. I'll put some of the liquids in, some of the water in, the washout water from the 2 different boilies into another bucket, 4 or 5 handfuls of particle in there, and I'll mush it all up. I'll just let it soak all that juice up, break down again. So if I have another fish, you've got a handful of crushed Activate and the Coron specials out there, all washed out and not so spooky, and then 2 or 3 handfuls of the pellet, which will, not give off too many danger signals. By lunchtime, if it hasn't kicked off again, you do your normal baiting up. But again, I'd still use the washed out because I want a quick bite. But I'd put some fresh pellet out there that's going to last for sort of 3-4 hours, especially temperatures at the moment, water's about 20 degrees. So sort of 10 mil pellet, the feed pellet's lasting about 4 or 5 hours. So remember that. If they love the pellet, I love feeding them the pellet. After 4 or 5 hours, you've basically got dust there, which the roach are probably smashed up as soon as it's soft enough to eat. So even if you don't want to keep putting boilie out, make sure you keep putting 2-3 handfuls of pellet out to keep things ticking over. Because it's summer, believe it or not, I changed the pellet that I feed them. So they still get the 2 different size Coppins pellet, 4.5 mil and the 10 mil, mainly 10 mil, but a little bit of 4.5 to keep them sort of grubbing around. But I also then, in this warm weather, I add some halibut pellet to their feed, and these are 15 mil. These come from a very good company called Northern Baits over in Scandinavia. Really, really good quality, quite high in oil, which I've got no problem with at this time of year. And all I do is I'll probably add 3 or 4 handfuls over each rod, and I'll spread them out just as I would boilies. Just gives a little bit more attraction, lots of salts and minerals and stuff that they're looking for at this time of year. And that's sort of the bulk of my feed. So to recap that, for 48 hours, let's just talk about the rods that I'm about to put out. So I've got 3 rods. I'll probably put out 1 kilo to 2 kilos of mixed bait per rod, and that will consist of probably 1 kilo of halves, chopped baits, all different sizes, Activate and the Coron specials in my case. It will consist of 4 or 5 handfuls of the 10 mil Coppins, 4 or 5 handfuls of the 4.5 mil Coppins, and probably a handful or 2 of the 15 mil halibuts. And I will also put in literally a handful of particle. We do lupins and maize, which is what they get fed a lot, and I'll sort of put that quite tight, and the rest of it I'll spread in the line, try and get them moving down the line. So that's sort of quantity wise. Looking at actual hook baits and stuff, those that know me know I've got an addiction to hook baits and pop-ups. I use an awful lot of different ones, but over here I've kind of settled on a few, to be honest, which makes my life easier. And I will look at those now. So, excuse the state of the pot, you can see it's well used. Quality bait, that's a big liner, that one, that's not the wind. It's quality bait, activate, very readily, easily digestible. They see an awful lot of it because I feed it and a lot of anglers use it, and it resembles a pellet. So all in all, if I was going to use one bait, that would be it. That's a mix of the dumbbells, the little 15-18mm dumbbells, and the pop-ups, both in the same pot and glugged up in the a little bit in the syrup and a bit of salmon oil. So that has gone on 2 of the 3 rods. I've got a multi-rig out on one with a slightly whittled down pop-up on it, and then on the other one I have one of the washed out activates, sort of 2/3 of a washed out activate and 1/3 of one of the activate matching pop-ups. So really unobtrusive, not scary, no colour. On the 3rd rod I've got some of the halibut hook pellets. As I say, I feed them the 10 mils, an awful lot. They probably see, when there's no one fishing here, they'll see over 100 kilo a week at the right time of year. When there's people fishing here, they'll see at least 25 kilo a week of it. So it's readily available for them, and they love it. Puts on a lot of weight for them. So these are some of the pellets that we stock here in the shop. That's the black halibuts. They're pre-drilled, pre-soaked, and they've got an extended life. They'll last about, excuse the dog, they'll last about 8-12 hours in the water. They say slightly longer, I like to stick with 8-12 hours. So I'll put them out in the sort of afternoon, and I'll redo them in it just before sort of us go to bed, and then I know I'm confident they'll be there all night. I use a double, either on a, I think fashionably it's now called as the dog's bollocks rig. We used to call it the reverse pig, sort of 2 side by side, or I put 2 in a length sort of on the hair like that. Either way, that's what they're used to eating, so anyone that sort of doesn't use a pellet hook bait every now and then is probably missing out. And then I'll have a couple of colours if things are tricky, or I think, you know, I'm going to throw a single at a fish. I do often prefer to put a bit of colour at them. So I've got 2 favourites, one's still in the bag, but one is the salty squids. They need absolutely no introduction. One, they're pink, fish love them. They're slightly washed out, not a crazy fluoro, and they stink to high heaven like a proper old school pop-up used to smell like. And funnily enough, this is one of my favourite winter pop-ups as well. They absolutely love it. Not just here but everywhere. I've caught a lot of fish from the publics in the area. And then the other one would be the frutellas, the orange pop-ups, because they do love orange in here. Obviously I've got every other colour under the sun as well, but you know, as a starting point, those are my 2 favourite colours, and there are my other sort of favourite hook baits. Lastly, especially as we go into autumn and in spring, is the old rock salt. It doesn't get used nearly enough. Fish absolutely love it for not just, it's not really a taste thing, it's a sort of a scientific thing with regard to osmosis and everything else. Fish have got salt in their bodies and the fresh water around them hasn't, in short, so they're constantly battling to keep the salt in them. So anything that is salty, anchovies, all the things that we know they love, they absolutely adore, not from a food point of view but from an attraction point of view and a vitamin and mineral point of view. So yeah, that's bait. Hopefully that will give you a good idea. And if you think about the quantities, if I'm going to put 1 kilo to 1.5 kilos out per rod, I'm probably then going to put another kilo out, or say half a kilo per rod during the day, and if I catch one, which I hope I will, I'll probably put another 3 handfuls out. So hopefully I'll be getting through, say, 4 kilo a day, 5 kilo, 6 kilo a day on a push, of a combination of baits, and that can include pellet, particle and boilie. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of how I'm approaching it, how I think you're best positioned to catch fish, and hopefully give you a little indication on the quantities that you need to bring. Not a huge amount. I'm not one to tell you that, you know, fill my lake in, feed my fish for me, but it's definitely worth having it rather than running out on Wednesday. And if you get into a week where you're landing 20-30 fish, they will eat a lot. So hopefully that helps. Cheers.